So, hello everyone. We are now here on our next episode of Author Interview. I am Tiffany from Ukiyoto Publishing, and we have our guest here, Mr. Alvin Servaña from Manila. He wrote the book Soulful Defibrillation. All right. So, thank you, Mr. Alvin, for having you here.
Thank you. Thank you for the time as well. I'm delighted to be participating in this academic and meaningful endeavor.
All right. So, now let's begin. Can you tell me what was your book all about without too much spoiler?
Yeah, sure. It's an anthology of poetry that somehow captures the struggles of the inner self, transitioning from thoughts of depression, bordering to suicide, to a breath of fresh air and a light of new hope. So that would somehow capture the very thought and the very heart of the collection titled Soulful Defibrillation.
All right, that is very great to know. So, ininsayo ko talaga yung kung paano mag-pronounce ng defibrillation.
Defibrillation, yeah.
It's hard for me, but anyway. So, thank you for sharing
Appreciate
that.
that.
Thank you for sharing that one. Also, what pushed you to write this book?
Initially, it was the intention, the original intention is just for academic purposes, like just to be circulated within the university or for perhaps student reading, your evaluation, something like that. And then the thought grew into developing it or to compiling it into one. The funny thing here is that um, uh, the if it were in a music, uh, the single, the carrier single, Soulful Defibrillation, was composed at the latter part when everything is being polished already. So it's like a hindsight, an insight through hindsight. And I was thinking because the thought of the entire collection was already put there, like the very thought of defibrillation or defibrillator. It's a medical tool, that's what we see in Grey's Anatomy or any medical drama. When someone is at the brink of death, and then uh, you charge these defibrillators to then the physician in charge would shout charge, and then it's trying to revive basically someone who is at the brink of dying. The same thing is true here. So I guess more than the supposed academic persuasion of publishing this or circulating this, it's the intent, you know, the intent to express and even to become a manifesto that there is hope, that life, even if it is full of absurdities, it's riddled with struggles, especially now within the past 2 years. There's a way. There's a way to transcend, uh, to to transcend the situation, to transcend the self, to transcend the challenges. So it's more existential. The inner motivation is more existential, more humanistic, and uh, as I mentioned, it's towards something metaphysical. So these are the well philosophical and psychological, even theological underpinning of of this collection. That is why you would see. I don't know if you would if I would have to mention some of the parts or some of the poems. it's really starting from within and then looking to the without. And I believe if it was accessible to anyone, is what I want. And I cannot rein in this this poetic thought not to be shared, and hopefully for those who would have the suitable ears to receive the embedded message, the embedded discourse in my poetic vision, in the poetic vision of this collection, it would spark hope. It would spark uh, not necessarily optimism, but the idea that what if I will not give up? What would push me not to give up and continue with this life, no matter how hard it may get? So that is, I would say, my compound motivation for writing and publishing this collection.
All right. Wow. I was speechless. So instead of reviving the literal organ, the heart itself, the book tells that, I mean, it heals the soul in its entirety. So yeah, that's
Yes.
beautiful. All right. So when did you realize that you wanted to write and how?
That's a fascinating question because um, looking back, ever since my high school days, I have been compiling poetry. Of course, it underwent certain maturity until I reached college when I became a literature major. I'm a literature major. Both my undergrad and my master's are in the field of literature and literature teaching and cultural studies. So I guess so much exposure with both with the classics and the contemporary, the masters, call it, name it, Shakespeare, the lyricism of Dante Alighieri, um, the the poetic vision of Sophocles, the Greeks, and then the contemporaries, the likes of, say, William Carlos Williams, Jose Garcia Villa, you know, um, uh, Alexander Pushkin. So even some sense of romanticism in the lyric of Jose Rizal. So the I would say these are the traditions that I would um, I would humbly admit that I was born into. So I cannot say that I was devoid of any literary tradition. No, these are my influences. With some persuasions from of course reading the Bible, being a devout follower of the Lord Jesus Christ, being his disciple, and reading theology, being exposed to it, with philosophy, exposed to philosophy. So all of these, um, let me put it this way. Um, in an economy of words, with an expenditure of language, without having an income of ideas, it would lead me to conceptual bankruptcy. And I guess it's true to all writers, to everyone who's engaged in the field of letters, of language, literature. There has to be a constant exposure to reading. We cannot write until and unless we can read. And we read with quality. We read with quality. We read with intention because it will shape, of course, the objective understanding of the writing tradition, but it is also, as one of the books in creative writing teaches, it will also court the muse. It will bring forth ideas and uh, and give birth to ideas that is embedded in my individuality, in the individuality of the author. So it's really being in the field of literature that helped me somehow carve a niche, uh, look at the play on words, the play on ideas, and then incorporate the experience, subjective experience in objective reality, you know. So it has to be that composite subjectivity, composite experiencing of the intellect, of the affective, and the will or the volition. So it's that inner self and the influences therein and around it that would really convince me to write, to communicate, to express, not to impress, but to express. Because there's a, whether we admit it or not, there's an evil outside that needs to be combated, and there's an evil inside that needs to be negotiated with in order to be mortified. And how do you deal with that? Writing. Publishing comes after, when I would say that the publishing is a is already the ratification of what is existent. So that's, I would say that's the broad picture of my journey in this particular collection.
All right. So thank you for that, Alvin, for sharing that one. And also, yes, when it comes to writing, I'm sure that you have other things to do, like your profession and all. But how did you find your time, or how did you manage your time when it comes to writing?
There's no punctuated time for, that, like I would put on my writing, my writer's cap. No, it's really like what I mentioned earlier. It's really like courting the muse. Being ready, just being ready to receive the idea and wrap it in the flesh of language. You know, clothe it with the expressions that, you see, experiences can be accessible to everyone, but what makes a literary piece, a poetry, for instance, unique is not so much of this is my style, or this is my, I'm being, I'm being groundbreaking or avant-garde-ish. It's not about that, but it's trying to personalize what is accessible to everyone. And I think the 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 arrival of such, I would say, inspiration can come even to the littlest and most minute experience, most minute or mundane experience, riding the jeepney, experiencing the drop of water on under the shower, or even sitting on the throne. So even the littlest particle of dust, you know it can be a peephole to the universe, to the vastness of the human experience. So it's really more of, okay, I am willing to write, and I will discover what I would want to write by being prepared, having my pen and paper ready, or having my cell phone notes ready whenever I travel, or whenever I wake up in the middle of the night, or just jotting down the keywords while there is a class happening, because ideas can come. And it would be one of my greatest regrets if I would let an idea come and then go without developing it. And it just so happens that at this point of time, my strongest suit in literary language is poetry. So it's really allowing yourself to be the landing point, and the intersection, the vortex of ideas, the paradoxities of experiences, and reality and expectation, and then trying to breathe it in, you know, and then letting it simmer until you are ready to put on, as I mentioned, to clothe it, to enflesh it with the language that I possess. So that's, it's really not really okay. At this time, I will write. You know, but for those who make it a living, make it write for a living, yes, perhaps because they are time pressured. But for me, for the likes of I am, who write not in order to earn money, but to contribute mainly to the poetic discourse, to the literary tradition of the Philippines, the literary heritage. You know, it's really that creative process that is not chronologically determined, but opportunistically motivated. So the opportune time is the time that helps me uh, capture the idea and then put it in the under the permanence of pen and ink, pen and paper.
All right. So there's really no particular schedule that you are following when it comes to writing. So just be ready. So, all right. So thank you for sharing that. And also, aside from poetry, is there any other genre that you are interested in when it comes to writing a book?
Well, actually, that's a fascinating question. I'm about to finish another volume of uh, literary piece that is a like a combination of creative nonfiction and fiction. Well, I call it autobiographical fiction or self-narrative. Um, the title is there. Perhaps I don't know. Ukiyoto can uh, we can work on it that again,
Sure, sure.
and and that's exciting because um, it's more like an expanded version of my poetic vision, and this time uh, through semi-suspended semi-suspended and extended narratives. So that it's in a prose form, and yeah, that's really on the line already. I'm also except aside from writing poetry in English, Filipino, being a Filipino writing in English, I also have my growing body of collection of poems in Filipino. I published two of my poems in Filipino uh, a year ago, last year, and yeah. So far, those are the genre that I am uh, honing myself.
All right. So, upon the, I mean, during the completion of soulful defibrillation, what were your learnings on that
Mm,
process?
wow, so much, so much. Number one, uh, let me first give my reflection on the writing and publishing process.
Mm-hmm.
I am so glad that at this point of time, if I may, wear my heart out at this point, I am so glad that at this point, I am not running after publication. I didn't really think that my poetry would be. Of course, as a writer, as a literature person, writing is to be distributed. That's the idea. But it's not so much of I have to make a name. When I was a lot younger, a younger graduate of literature, it's like something I really aspire for, so that people will look up to me. My students will look up to me. Uh, in the last 5 to 7 years, it has changed. It's the thought, the view changes from letting it happen than chasing it. This is one of my favorite analogies. The most important things in life, they are like sleeping. Sleepiness is not something you chase after. Sleepiness will happen. you know, because the more you chase after sleeping, the more that it will elude you, you know. But if you just relax there, just enjoying the gloom, the darkness of the night, and then the cozy temperature, and then the regulated breathing, sleep will happen, you know. The same thing is true analogically with publication. If I because I've been compiling my letters, my poetry, it's a matter of time that publication will happen. And so Ukiyoto is such an empowering testimony. It's an energizing testimony for me, and it's also an empowering testimony for some. That's why I'm thankful for Ukiyoto for having this kind of allowing this platform for those who write independent, you know. And it gives us I would say it democratizes writing and publication. Of course, there's prestige in publication, in being published, and I am published. So there's a prestige in it. But what Kyoto does, or at least the impression it gives, is, you know what? Yes, you can write, but you don't have to be one of the elites. You don't have to be an elite to write, to be published. But it creates and cultivates the culture of readership, of creativity. That's one thing I celebrate. You know? So see, that's the kind of reflection that I've been ruminating about for the past couple of months already. And at the heart of it is gratitude. I have learned and I have arrived at this phase of gratitude through this publication, through this process of publication. The pressure was there, but it was a creative pressure. It was not a a burden that's crushing, but it's a healthy burden. It is a strengthening burden, you know. So that is what that's on that side. The other thing is that poetry is really like wine. Uh, the more the more you although I do not drink. I haven't consumed alcoholic drink for the record, but I just
Okay.
know the idea, you know. I just know the idea that it's like wine. The more that it from the moment it was composed out of genuine experience, authentic, raw experience, the longer that it lasts as in my repository, in my archive, the more spirited it becomes. There's a couple of poems in this book that was written 2013, 2012,
Ooh.
years back. And so when there's this, closing in of idea that happens, okay, so this poem was written in a different experience or in a different mindset, but it is anticipated in the publication of this. So it's like finding home with the other poems. So all the more that writing becomes really an expression of the soul. It's the language of the soul. Poetry is the language of the soul because of its manifold impressions. All that it can do is to express that reality, that moment into condensed language. I think that's one of the reasons why I am more uh, what do you call that? More inclined to writing poetry. There's this healthy ambiguity. And the paradox is I write these ambiguities in order to clarify the the intersections of my experiences in the soul. So it gives me time, and it gives me uh the what do you call it? The liberty to be myself, to know my strengths, to know my weaknesses, to know my virtues, to know my vices, and realize that all of these can only mean something if they are packed as an act of offering worship, praise to someone, to that eternal someone whom I owe my existence. So see, these are the learning. And so what excites me all the more is when I go to class, when face-to-face classes happen again, and when I teach poetry, that's a totally different brand. I know this time I will teach poetry not by the book, but from the book with my experience, because I will be a poet in flesh. I will be poetry in flesh. I will be poet in flesh, and I can only imagine how it will change the atmosphere of teaching and learning poetry in that class. Whoever the students will be.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the whew,
Right. All right.
soulful journey.
Yes. From the title of your book. All right. So, true, not just from the book when you will teach in the future, if face to face will happen, you will incorporate your experiences as well. So thank you very much, Alvin, and also for the kind words about Ukiyoto. And also, we have talked about your journey in writing. What about when you're not writing? What stuff do you like? What do you like to do when you are not writing?
Hmm. Again, let me answer that in an aphorism. Breathe in experience, breathe in life, breathe out poetry. So I just relish the experience of teaching, reading, just the company of being in the company and the chorus of my books, authors that I suppose I will not have met in my lifetime, but they're just there, you know. They're just their writings are just there, and they're just ready to be read, and to be a channel of inspiration in my teaching. You know, um, just keep on reading. I just keep on reading. I read to teach. I read to write. But more than anything, I read to discover. I am desperate as an introvert that I am. I don't know if it manifests, but I am an introvert. I'm a highly functional introvert, and which means that I get tired in engaging with people, you know. Uh, and so, what's the best way? If as a literature person, I have to be exposed to raw experiences, but I get tired when I when I mingle with people. What is the next best alternative? Well, read books, listen to their thoughts, to the writings of of the past, to the writers of the past, to the writers of the contemporary time, and also being an active filter of culture. You know, I am fond of visual media, of advertising, because these are miniature poetry. I find them miniature poetry. Well, personally, I define poetry as something that hits you between your eyes. Well, I'm picking it up from Sylvia Plath. this American poetess. Poetry is something that that hits you right between your eyes, meaning something that makes you think. And knowing that I am a cosmopolitan person, I'm a metropolitan person, I live in the city, might as well be exposed, you know, be exposed in the city life, the city thoughts, and then try to uh, maneuver it, to leverage them, you know. So that's what I do. So in other words, I might be a consumer. I subscribe to consumerism, but I have confident consumerism. I consume not for the sake of consumption, but I consume so that I can transform it or reform it into something that is meaningful, to something that communicates and um, strikes the strings of consciousness and impression and uh, and the common reality of this contemporary life. So there, I just immerse in the culture, but more than the not it's not only immersion, it's being insulated. You know, uh, you see, as a in cultural understanding, um, people can go from one swing to the other. So some might isolate, as in culture is rubbish. Culture is, is dirty. You know, cultural, the politics, media, isolate. But that's not. But there's the other way, the other extreme, and that is to immerse, to be incorporated, as in, to be totally drawn by culture to the point that you don't think on your own anymore. You're just like anyone else. But the good thing is there's the middle ground. And what's that? That's the middle ground. So if you have isolate and then you have incorporate, the middle ground is insulate. Insulate is when you're immersed, but you do not get affected. Pretty much like of a tuna or a saltwater fish. You see, tuna, again, let me speak an analogy. Tuna, whenever we eat it, we still put salt on it, right? Or soy sauce, right? We salinate it as well. But how come we need to salinate fish or tuna, for instance, even if it came from the ocean? You see why? Because the tuna, even if it is in the ocean, it is not permeated by salty water. It insulates itself from the salty water. Hence, we salinate it whenever we cook it, right? The same thing is true for us human beings. We cannot afford to isolate ourselves from culture. We cannot afford to be totally immersed in culture that you are not, you are totally drawn by culture, by the waves, the tidal waves of culture. But you have to insulate. And it requires internal awareness and incorporation of ideas that we learn in the class. That we learn in the class. That is why um, this American philosopher, education philosopher, says that classroom is the rehearsal, is the laboratory for life. So for those who will listen to this, students, regardless of the field or the course, try to ask yourself how you can practice and use whatever it is that you're learning in the class, online or face to face. Use it, you know, because for all you know, you can never be ready enough to write. But when you are exposed and immersed and insulated with experiences, sooner or later it will flow out naturally. So that's the kind of preparation I I do, as if I may put it that way.
All right. So thank you, Alvin. And as usual, it's nice listening to your inputs. As me, I have also learned so much from your answers as well. And
Thank
also,
you.
do you have your book right now with you?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's with me.
All right. So, yes, can you read just one short piece from it and then
Okay.
so you can share it with everybody?
Yeah. Uh, hmm. I guess let me read. We choose something. Let me read my on page 29 of this book, Psalm 4. Okay. Psalm 4, which follows that there are other songs that I've written. I just didn't include it here, you know, perhaps on another volume. But let me read for you, for us, Psalm 4. Psalm 4. Why do you complain, O my soul, for the darkness that you see despite the light that shines, the light that is the Lord externally? You, my soul, see and sit in this dark room, like the moon hiding from the sun, whence it borrows its night gloom. Behind the world in inverted gloom, oh, the darkness, that pitch black shadow, it is but yourself, void and hollow. Never look forward in that state, for that gloom that you have, that you are, is a turn of motion away from the light, and the door out of the darkness is a back away. Find your true north, you lost compassion. Turn, turn now. Stop being the nightmare that feeds your own fear. Leap, leap back on the stallion of glory, who gallops mightily from yonder, and now is your knight, your armor, your light. Why do you complain, O my soul, for the darkness that you see, when you are a turn away from the full delight that returns?
Wow. Okay, so let's give Mr. Alvin a virtual clap. All right. So right there, it's very beautiful, and the words are used so that everybody that gets to read it will come into a conclusion that they really comprehend and can understand whatever it is it's written in that
Mm.
page. All right, so thank you so much. And also, are there any people that you would like to thank?
Oh yeah. First and foremostly, of course, I thank the Lord for this opportunity. This is, I would say, this is a manifesto of me being created in His image, being created by the power of His Word. You know that He is the divine logos. He's the divine Word, and so I can only respond into meaningfulness of words, this time in light of His mercy and grace. So I believe this is a, I hope, I can only hope that this is a pleasing offering to Him. Also, I personally dedicate this to my mom. My mom passed, although she passed away 2013, several years ago, but still the 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 nostalgia is there. Uh, uh, the wound of having someone depart uh, never heals. I only grow. We can only grow bigger than that. But there's a hope that there is a grand reunion in Christ, in the Lord. I also thank, um, of course, Ukiyoto for this platform, for this opportunity, because it's really a milestone. I would say this is a milestone in my life. This is a milestone in my career. This is a milestone teaching career and uh, literary career. Uh, I will always be grateful for the team. You know, the, uh, and I would also like to express my appreciation to my fiance. she was the one who designed the cover. She yeah. So um, I gave her. I just told her that you know what, I'll be writing a book of poetry, and then it's gonna be published, and this is the title. And what do you think? In her creative talent, she gave me this, and I said, okay, that's that somehow summarizes in in an image what I wish to communicate in this soulful defibrillation. And I also thank the people who have been with me through thick and thin and thinner and thinnest. You know, those people who believe and who were um, in silent appreciation of what I can do, what I can write, what I can achieve, and yeah. So there. Yeah. So these are the people that I'd like to thank, persons that like to thank, and I hope this makes this finds favor and greater utility and appreciation to most, if not for all. So there.
All right. So thank you. So through God and through those people that you have
Mm.
mentioned, you get to be where you are right now. And
Yeah,
yes, how about your social media sites so that the readers can check on you and follow your writing journey?
right. I'm not really strong in social media. I told you I'm an introvert. But yeah, I have a Facebook account, but it's it's really private. Um, so I don't have Twitter. I don't have Instagram. Just Facebook for some purposes. But yeah, uh, how should I put this? I'm not really strong at social media, so it's
All
not
right.
really where I promote.
I understand. So social interactions can really drain our energy. I also classify
Yes,
myself as an introvert. So after meeting other people, we need to recharge by doing things that we need to
yes,
do alone.
exactly.
Okay. So thank you, Alvin. Also,
Thank you, Tiffany. Yeah,
for the last question, what's your
yeah, sure.
advice to young people that is aspiring poet?
Uh, never stop learning. Never stop learning. Always be at the. Always be a student. Always be a student of of history, of the classic. Uh, always, I'd like to borrow the idea of um uh, who's this? The founder of Apple, Steve Jobs. Stay hungry, stay foolish. Of course, it has to be qualified. Stay hungry for learning. Stay foolish, meaning to say, never think that you are the smartest person in the room. Always ask question. Always interrogate. Okay, and always have a contact to your inner self. You know? Strengthen your intrapersonal health, which other people would call mental health, but I would call it intrapersonal health because it's where your internal monologue happens. You know, it's where you're like Psalm 4 that I read. It's an internal monologue. It's your dialogue to your soul. So how uh, how do you get to dialogue with yourself if you do not know yourself? Always inquire, always ask question, always read, always strive for learning. You see, learning is a psychologically, it's just an adjustment. It's just a change of behavior. But if you come to think of it as a metaphysical experience, learning is a paradox. The more you aspire for it, the more that it eludes, not really eludes you, but the more it points you to something that there is something greater to be learned. You know, in the words of Socrates, the more you know, the more you do not know. But it's not a celebration of agnosticism, but it's really an intellectual virtue. It's an intellectual humility that you can never learn enough. You can never learn, you can never come in prepared enough. So might as well be sufficient. Be sufficient. Know what you want to express, find the right inspirations, and find the right aspirations, and find the right peer motivations. Right. So find the right inspiration, find the right aspiration, and find the right motivation. In that way, you can keep creating, and you will find sooner or later an audience that would lend their ears to you. Not because they know you, but because you share the same structure of experience and anguish of the soul and aspiration for something greater.
All right. So yes, there you go. There you go. That's the most beautiful advice that I have ever heard. So never stop learning, and all those things will come into place in the future. So right, Alvin, thanks for being here and for agreeing with us to have this interview.
My pleasure.
And okay, so make sure, guys, make sure to check out Alvin's book, Soulful Defibrillation. I will be placing the links on the description on our social media sites. So, all right, that would be all, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.